Welcome to the Practice Autonomy Podcast with Dr. Chris Griffin, your playbook for building an independent, resilient, efficient, and profitable dental practice. Each episode, you'll hear proven systems, strategies, and stories that help you protect one main thing as a private practice dentist: your freedom. Now here's your host, Dr. Chris Griffin.
Hey everybody, this is Dr. Chris Griffin. Welcome back to the Practice Autonomy Podcast. So happy to have you back. And today we're going to be talking about one of the four components of a really high level practice. Back when we did the practice productivity program, where the whole goal was to teach dentists how to get very high productivity out of a single practice day, but maintain very high excellence, we decided there are really just four parts to any dental practice. The first two are pretty obvious, right? You have to have the dentist and the patient. The dentist part of the program, we called it DDS leaders. It stood for dynamic, basically. So dynamic means the doctor is going to be committed to maintaining a very high level and also committed to being able to change if they need to and stay committed to that as it betters the practice. And the other obvious part is the patient. And so we had a lot of systems around, hey, what's best for the patients, what makes them happy, and how do we build a fence or a fortress around those patients once they come to our practice? Because once they come here, we don't want them leaving, right? Can't build a practice if people are going out the back door as fast as they're coming in. Well, it would be a pretty sad practice if you didn't have the third part, which we'll talk in depth about today, the staff. Now, that part of the program we called Superstar Staff, and we had a big old program just towards staff. I know we worked with over 1,000, I guess probably multiple thousands over the years, staff members, because, you know, every office has 6 or 7 members that would come through the program. So we're really proud of the results we got with staff. I believe we did a great job getting them on board and getting them motivated and getting everybody on the same page. You know, we had a really cool process. We'd have hot seats and have the staff and doctor go in front of everybody, and we'd work through their daily productivity and come to some real big conclusions that help those practices. So the Superstar Staff program is very important. If you want to have a highly productive and excellent dental practice, you got to have great staff. So we'll talk about that today. The fourth pillar is really what we would call it the environment. So it's everything that affects those other three parts. And the facility and labs and stuff like that would fall under that environment part. Also color coding and templated rooms and all that stuff. But today, let's talk about staff and just how important that is. Now, years ago, I wrote a series of articles that were published in different magazines: The Profitable Dentist, Dental Economics, Dental Town, various other smaller magazines like AGD magazines and stuff like that. But we wrote a series of articles about staff. And so what I thought would be best would be to get my AI podcast team from last time, if you remember them, they did a great job then, to go over and sort of really take all of the information that I published in some of the major articles about that and distill it down into really nice talking points and talk about that and go through that whole program. And then at the end, I will come back and we will recap it. Okay. So here is the AI podcast team. Give them a big hand. Here you go.
Today, we're undertaking a pretty critical operation, you could say. We're pulling back the curtain on what really makes a professional practice tick, especially in dentistry, and that's the staff. Mm-hmm. We're going beyond just, salaries or vacation time. This is a deep dive into the psychology, the influence, the sheer operational need for the people who, let's face it, interact with your patients way more than you often do.
That's right.
And a lot of really skilled, successful doctors, the ones with the degrees, they admit, maybe quietly, that they struggle with this fundamental thing, getting their team really committed, enthusiastically committed to the practice's vision, both clinically and financially.
And that struggle, well, our sources really drive this home. It's often the single biggest thing holding back growth. The core idea here, our mission for this deep dive, is recognizing that your staff, they're the element that can genuinely make or break a practice today.
Make or break, that's strong.
It is. They hold this incredible potential for growth, but only, and this is the key, only if the doctor figures out how to tap into that commitment, understand what actually motivates them, and deal with those concerns that often go unspoken. So we're here to uncover those, let's call them operational secrets the staff hold, and lay out some practical strategies for doctors to leverage that hidden resource.
Okay, but before we even get to leveraging anything, we have to tackle something pretty confronting. It's like an immediate ego check for any practice owner listening.
Yeah.
Our deep dive material points to this surprising fact. A huge chunk of patients actually value the staff's opinion and expertise more than the doctor's when it comes to things like investment or, what to do next.
Absolutely. And that forces us, like the source material says, to kind of step outside of the fancy white coats and big college pedigrees for a second.
Yeah.
We need to see where the real influence actually lies. It's not about clinical skill. Patients generally assume the doctor is the expert there. This is about relational authority. It's about trust.
Yeah.
I mean, think about the whole patient journey.
Yeah.
Who's the first person they talk to on the phone? Who helps them figure out their insurance mess? Who's right there, maybe holding their hand before the anesthetic really kicks in?
The staff. Always the staff.
Exactly, the staff. And patients often feel that the staff member, because they're not the ultimate authority figure, maybe offers a more, objective view, a more human perspective on the treatment plan, especially when it involves time and money.
So, okay, the doctor has the final word on if the treatment is needed, clinically speaking.
Right.
But the staff often becomes the trusted voice on if it's feasible for the patient, comfortable, worth the investment right now. That split in trust, it makes the staff way more than just helpers. They're critical influencers from the word go.
Okay, let's unpack that influence a bit more then. Because if the staff holds that much trust, their job description just got a whole lot more complex than maybe we thought.
The material we looked at defines their role not just as support, but as the all-important middleman and, crucially, the buffer zone between the patient and the doctor.
Yeah, that buffer zone idea is key. They're literally the shock absorbers in the practice. The analysis shows how they're constantly, actively compensating, adjusting how they talk, their whole demeanor really, to sort of balance out the doctor's natural style.
Balancing the doctor. How so?
Well, this balancing act is crucial for the patient experience and, ultimately for getting patients to accept treatment.
Okay, so give us an example. How does a staff member actually compensate for, say, different doctor personalities?
All right, let's take the doctor who might be a bit too timid. You see this sometimes with highly clinical doctors, right? Brilliant technically, but they maybe struggle with the sales aspect of a big procedure.
Sure.
They might present a $10,000 treatment plan, but they sound hesitant or they downplay the urgency because they're just not comfortable with that financial conversation.
And the patient picks up on that hesitation instantly.
Instantly. So the staff member, maybe it's the scheduler, maybe the hygienist who has a good rapport, they have to step in and provide that missing assertiveness.
Right.
They might say something like, "Mrs. Jones, the doctor's very thorough, but what he's really saying is delaying this implant could lead to more bone loss, make things more complicated down the road. Let's see if we can get that first step booked for next Tuesday. The sooner we start, the smoother it'll be." See? They confidently pick up the slack.
Wow, yeah. Turning a hesitant presentation into a commitment, that's a huge save operationally.
Definitely.
Now, what about the other extreme? The doctor who's maybe too forceful, blunt, super direct, maybe overly clinical, leaving the patient feeling kind of steamrolled or overwhelmed.
Right, the opposite of problem. So in that case, the staff member needs to become the source of calm, of reassurance. The forceful doctor might walk out after listing off technical jargon and all the potential risks.
Leaving the patient terrified.
Exactly. So the staff member steps in, maybe even takes a calming breath with the patient, and smooths those rough edges. They translate the doctor's monologue into a reassuring conversation. Okay, the doctor wants to be sure you understand everything, but honestly, Dr. X does this procedure several times a week, will take excellent care of you. You're really in good hands here. They validate the doctor's skill, but manage the patient's anxiety.
It really sounds like the staff functions as the emotional intelligence of the whole practice, making sure every patient feels okay leaving, regardless of the doctor's specific bedside manner.
And that leads us right to the most critical moment for turning interest into actual treatment. The post-doctor conversation.
Ah, yes.
This is that specific window right after the doctor leaves the room where patient trust often shifts entirely to the staff. It just confirms how vital they are for productivity, for revenue. The sources we looked at consistently highlight two questions staff hear over and over in that moment.
And the first one is almost universal, isn't it? What did the doctor just say?
Exactly. It says so much about that communication gap, right, between the highly specialized expert and an anxious patient. The doctor might have used words like occlusion, periodontal involvement, endodontic procedure.
Good jargon.
And The patient may be stressed, maybe uncomfortable, just nodded along. They need a translator. They look to the staff to de-jargonize it, explain it in normal human terms like, okay, he said the nerve in your back tooth is infected. We need to clean it out to save the tooth, and it'll take 2 visits. If the staff can't do that translation effectively, that treatment plan suddenly feels way too confusing, too big.
That makes sense. But it's the second question that really hits the bottom line, isn't it? What do you think I should do?
That is the ultimate moment of truth. The soft close, really. The patient's moving past the clinical need and seeking validation for the investment. They're not asking for a second clinical opinion.
Yeah.
They're asking for guidance on the practicalities, timing, money, priority. It's like they're saying, okay, you know me, you know my situation, my budget concerns, how this place works. Is this really worth doing right now?
Yeah. That puts enormous pressure on the staff member, pressure that maybe isn't always recognized.
Huge pressure. Because if that staff member hesitates, if they sigh, if their face shows even a hint of doubt, or if they say something vague like, well, it's really up to you.
Poof, the booking disappears.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
The patient reads that hesitation as a red flag, but they read confidence as confirmation. So this just nails it down.
Yeah.
The staff member is the pivotal person for maximizing treatment acceptance, for booking those procedures. If your staff isn't fully bought into why that treatment is important, philosophically or financially, that lack of commitment leaks out the second they're asked, what do you think? And that translates directly to lost revenue. So for you, the listener, understanding and optimizing that specific moment is absolutely critical for your practice's productivity metrics.
Okay, so we've established just how much power and influence the staff actually wields. The next big hurdle is facing the uncomfortable reality this powerhouse might not be firing on all cylinders.
Our source material really hammers this point.
Mm-hmm.
Many practice owners are, and this is the quote, totally oblivious that their staff's minds and, well, hearts aren't always in total lockstep with the practice vision, not 100% of the time anyway.
The oblivious head honcho problem. The doctor's busy doing their thing, focusing on the clinical work, the revenue targets, and they assume that if the staff shows up and does the basics, everything's fine, everyone's bought in.
But the sources make it really clear that true commitment goes way deeper than just, clocking in and out.
Yeah.
And look, we should acknowledge, disagreement itself isn't automatically bad. Actually, a practice where everyone thought exactly the same would probably be, as the material puts it, very boring.
Yeah.
And likely not very adaptable. You need some variance in thought for good problem solving.
Sure, diversity of thought is healthy.
Right. The problem is when that lack of alignment turns into active disengagement or indifference, or that sort of quiet, simmering frustration, that's what kills productivity.
So the leader's goal isn't necessarily identical thinking, but alignment in action and commitment, even if opinions differ sometimes.
Exactly. And to get there, the leader has to do something crucial. They have to go searching for the staff's secrets.
Okay, secrets sounds dramatic. What are we really talking about here?
Yeah, it's not about deep, dark personal stuff. These are operational truths, relational truths that the staff absolutely knows, but the doctor is either shielded from or just isn't seeing. This search means figuring out those basic human drivers. What makes your staff happy? What makes them sad or frustrated at work? What are those chronic little things that just drain their energy day after day? And fundamentally, what makes them want to get up in the morning and genuinely commit to coming to your office instead of taking their skills down the street to your competitor?
And this goes way beyond just salary, assuming the pay is reasonably competitive. We're talking about the work environment itself, right? How people communicate, the tools they have to work with, the internal dynamics, the little office politics.
All of it. Those are the things that build up into this powerful undercurrent of non-commitment if they're not addressed.
And you're saying doctors just can't afford to ignore performance that isn't fully committed anymore?
Not in today's dental world, no.
Yeah.
The cost of that non-commitment, it's real, it's quantifiable, and it's huge.
How does that cost actually show up? What are the signs?
Well, the sources are pretty clear that the old model, where you could just hang a shingle and be as successful as we want, that's pretty much over.
Right. Competition spheres, DSOs, more consumer awareness.
Exactly. So practice efficiency is everything now. And non-committed staff, that shows up as systemic problems. Things like failing to consistently follow up on overdue recalls, high turnover, especially in those key front office roles, accounts receivable creeping up because nobody's having those confident financial conversations. And a big one, slow treatment room turnaround times because people just aren't hustling.
So basically, low productivity and lots of internal friction, what the material called the barriers that have sapped productivity and caused squabbling.
Precisely. Like if a hygienist is constantly frustrated because the front desk schedules procedures without confirming insurance details first, a classic procedural breakdown, they might not complain directly to the doctor, but they'll show their resistance. Maybe claims processing slows down, maybe they're just less engaged with patients.
That passive resistance.
Yeah. And the only way to tear down those barriers is by getting at those secrets, by addressing those hidden friction points, often between the front and back office.
Okay, this brings us to something more hopeful, though. The Griffin finding. This came from Dr. Griffin's consulting work with practices that felt stuck, right?
Yes. And it's encouraging because it suggests the solution isn't usually some massive, complex overhaul. It's often about radical awareness and then actually acting on the small, persistent annoyances.
The core idea being that once everyone just becomes aware of the few little things that have been nagging at them, these problems that have maybe festered for years can actually be resolved pretty quickly.
Exactly. But we need to get specific about what those nagging issues usually are. Let's try and categorize them for the listener.
Good idea. Because it's rarely about the big mission statement plaque on the wall.
Almost never. Okay, first category, procedural issues. This could be outdated software that makes everyone do extra clicks for every single patient, just drains time, causes errors, or maybe a chaotic supply ordering system. Someone's always scrambling mid-procedure because a critical item is missing. These little daily procedural headaches, they really add up.
Okay, procedural. What's next?
Second, environmental issues. These often seem trivial to the doctor, who might not even notice them, but they can crush staff morale. Like a sterilization unit that's always breaking down, causing queues and delays, or maybe just bad lighting in the break room, or a copy machine that jams constantly so everyone avoids it. Just physical things that make the workplace irritating.
Right, the physical space matters. And the third type.
Finally, and these could be the trickiest, interpersonal issues. These are usually about communication breakdowns that nobody addresses directly. Maybe the hygiene team feels the front desk always prioritizes new patient exams over finding space for recalls. Or maybe there's that one team member who's always late, and everyone knows it, everyone resents it, but nobody, especially the doctor, ever confronts it. These unspoken tensions are huge energy sucks.
So the secret isn't some grand conspiracy. It's usually just the accumulated weight of all these unaddressed daily friction points.
That's exactly it. And the Griffin finding concludes that once those secrets are aired out, acknowledged, and actually fixed, even with small, simple solutions, all that productivity that was being wasted on managing internal friction, it comes flooding back. That's the path, the material suggests, to achieving fun, profitable growth to superstar levels. But it starts with the doctor admitting they might be oblivious and actively starting the conversation to find out what those chronic irritants really are.
Okay, so we've moved from recognizing the staff's power and uncovering their secrets to the next big step: sustained action and leadership. And this is where we hit that common wall, the complaint doctors mention all the time in our source material, the buy-in problem.
Yes, the buy-in conundrum.
Doctors say, look, I've got this great new program, maybe a new hygiene protocol, new software, whatever, it's technically sound, but I just cannot get my staff excited about it. I can't get them on board. The author we read actually called this difficulty a foreign concept because in their own successful practice, getting buy-in wasn't this huge struggle.
Right, and that difference, that gap, led the author to do something smart. They interviewed their own clinical team leader, and that conversation apparently opened up a whole new can of worms, providing this crucial insight into why staff genuinely commit to one leader and just resist another.
And the big reveal wasn't about the program itself, was it? It was all about trust in the leader.
Entirely. The team leader laid out 3 key trust points that basically define the relationship between the doctor and the staff when it comes to change.
Okay, what's the first one?
Trust point number 1 is fundamental: homework and conviction. The staff absolutely must believe, must trust, that the doctor has really done their homework on this new thing, and that the doctor genuinely believes it will work.
So no half-baked ideas.
Exactly. They need to know they aren't being asked to jump onto some bandwagon just because the doctor saw an ad in a magazine or heard something at a conference. They need confidence the doctor has thought through the risks, the costs, the training needed, the whole implementation piece.
That makes sense. The doctor's commitment has to be visible first. If they haven't put in the time, why should the staff put in the effort?
Precisely. Then the second trust point is adaptability. Staff need to trust that the doctor is willing to adjust course if needed. They need to know the doctor is practical, pragmatic, and willing to change something if it isn't going to work the way you want it to once it's actually rolled out.
That's huge for morale, I bet. It means they won't get stuck defending a bad system just because the doctor's too proud to admit it needs tweaking.
Right.
Yeah.
It makes them feel more like partners in getting it right, not just cogs forced to follow a flawed plan. But then there's the third point the team leader made. And this one sounds a bit tricky at first.
Okay.
The staff trusts the doctor, the team leader said, because the doctor never gives us a choice in the matter.
Whoa, okay. Never give us a choice. That
Yeah.
sounds, well, autocratic. How does that build trust in today's world?
It seems like a paradox, right?
Right.
But think about it in the context of the first 2 points. Because the staff trusts the doctor has done the homework, point 1, and because they trust the doctor will adapt if it's not working, point 2,
Okay.
they actually appreciate the strong direction on point 3. They willingly accept the new initiative because they know the doctor is fully committed
Yeah.
and will see it through. When the doctor says, we are doing this, the staff knows it's not just a suggestion, it's happening, and the resources will be there.
Yeah.
That consistency, that follow-through, actually builds trust, not resentment. It signals real leadership commitment.
Ah, okay. So it's not about being a dictator. It's about being reliably consistent and decisive once the groundwork, homework, and adaptability promise is laid.
Exactly. Trusted authority, not just throwing weight around. And these insights from the team leader lead directly to 3 really practical strategies, 3 pearls, the material calls them, for motivating staff and getting that buy-in. It's like framing change as an internal case presentation.
Okay, pearl number 1 seems pretty straightforward for modern management. Avoid intimidation.
Yeah, the material is crystal clear on this. Trying to manage through threats, even subtle ones, hinting about job security, criticizing people publicly, it just doesn't work long term. Why? Because staff have other options.
It's especially good staff.
Especially good staff. If you create a fear-based environment, the best you'll get is temporary surface-level compliance, and that often breeds something much worse.
Which is
Covert resistance.
the slow killer.
Exactly. It's like this slow poison in the practice. It totally wipes out any short-term gains you thought you got from being intimidating. Instead of quitting, staff just resist quietly. They slow walk the implementation of the new thing, they forget the new steps, they stick rigidly to only their job description and stop thinking about the practice's overall success. They give you the bare minimum effort. It turns potential commitment into this grudging compliance, which is way harder to deal with than open disagreement.
Okay, so no intimidation. Pearl number 2 connects directly back to that first trust point from the team leader. Doctor, do your homework. This is where that case presentation for the staff idea really comes in.
Right. This means going way deeper than just ripping a page out of a journal and saying, we should do this. Doing your homework means figuring out all the detailed ins and outs of whatever you're proposing. You need to be able to answer basically every practical question your staff might have before they even ask it.
So let's take an example. Say the doctor wants to implement a new online patient booking system. What specific homework do they need to do for staff buy-in?
Okay, good example. They need to understand and be ready to present first the ROI, not just for the practice, but how will this actually save the staff time or reduce their headaches? Second, the training plan. Has the doctor actually scheduled the training, budgeted the time for it? Have they maybe even gone through the tutorial themselves?
Show, don't just tell.
Yeah, exactly. Third, workflow impact. How will this new system interact with existing processes? Will it sync with the charting software? Could it cause double bookings? How do we prevent that? The doctor needs to have anticipated these potential bumps and present the plan in a knowledgeable fashion.
So you're turning the staff meeting from just giving instructions into like a professional demonstration. You're showing you've thought it through completely.
You are. You're creating that case presentation vibe. Think about it. You know a patient needs that crown, but they don't see the value yet, right? Same idea here. You know the practice needs this new system, but the staff might only see the disruption or the extra work initially. You have to tell them on the vision, backed up by all the implementation details and your plan to handle the challenges. You treat their potential resistance not as defiance, but as legitimate questions needing expert answers.
Makes sense. Okay, and the third pearl, this one sounds absolute. Stand by your word, always keep your word, never back down.
This is the bedrock, non-negotiable for building trust. If you announce a new policy, a new way of scheduling, a new financial protocol, anything, and then, under pressure, maybe from a complaining patient, or even staff pushback, you just let everyone slide back to the old way.
Credibility gone.
Instantly. The staff learns that your word isn't really your bond, that policies are flexible. That completely undermines the strength they need to feel committed. If you say you're doing it, you absolutely must follow through.
But this leads right back to that crucial warning, the caveat, that the source material compared to raising kids, right? Be very stingy with giving your word in the first place.
That's the safety valve. If you jump on every new idea that pops into your head and announce it as policy, you're bound to fail on executing some of them. And just one failure to follow through can undo months, even years of trust building. It's far better, far more effective leadership to make commitments rarely, but then execute those few commitments flawlessly.
Discipline in leadership.
It's strict self-discipline. Only announce things. Only give your word on initiatives that you are 100% prepared to back up with your time, your resources, and unwavering follow-through no matter what.
Okay. So if you combine these three strategies, no threats, do the rigorous homework like it's a case presentation, and be absolutely consistent, stingy, but absolute with your word, and you layer that on top of that deep awareness of what actually motivates your staff, their secrets,
then you create this powerful, self-reinforcing cycle. Trust builds accountability. Accountability fuels commitment. Commitment drives high performance. That's the blueprint the material offers for building that superstar staff. #tag outro.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, and the central takeaway feels pretty undeniable, really. Your staff, they aren't just interchangeable employees filling slots. They are absolutely critical operational buffers. They're the patient influencers who often make or break treatment acceptance. And they're kind of hidden decision makers affecting the daily productivity of your practice.
They hold those keys to growth, those secrets, those few little things nagging at them, that if you can just uncover them and resolve them, can genuinely unlock that fun, profitable growth.
Success today in this competitive dental world, it really seems to hinge completely on the doctor's ability to shake off that potential obliviousness, to really acknowledge the unspoken needs of the team, and then lead with consistency, with knowledge, and with high integrity.
It means checking the ego, doing that hard internal work, the case presentation prep for your own team, and then being absolutely reliable in every single promise you make.
So if the most direct path to becoming a superstar practice involves understanding and fixing what's currently draining your staff's energy, then the final question for you, the listener, has a couple of parts. First, given how much staff opinion matters and how crucial that doctor homework is before presenting anything new, how often do you really listen to your staff's input before you roll out a new idea? Not just asking for feedback after the fact, but genuinely building their insights into the plan from the start.
And maybe even more pointedly, think about this. What's that one specific small, maybe procedural secret, that one piece of equipment that's always on the fritz, or that persistent scheduling conflict between departments that's causing friction right now in your practice? That little detail, the one only an honest staff member probably knows the full impact of. That might just be the thread you need to pull first to start boosting productivity and reaching for those superstar levels. Fix the small stuff, and often the big stuff starts taking care of itself.
All right, now those guys do a great job. I really appreciate it. And so let's dive a little bit deeper into just what I was talking about before and what they were talking about. So dental staff, right? They are an absolute linchpin of a very high level, high producing, highly productive dental practice. Okay. Without great staff, you're just not going to be able to do the amount of dentistry that we think that you can do. And we've never recommended rushing through a procedure, but let me tell you something. The dentist's amount of time on a procedure usually has almost nothing to do with the outcome or the amount of throughput through the dental practice or how many patients you can see or how many procedures you can do. The dentist part is very limited. Now, if you're very skilled, you can also become very fast. You know, the best surgeons are usually the fastest. I mean, who wants to be in an operating room longer than they have to be? But they're also very excellent. So that's what I'm always like. You know, I'm fingers crossed getting my MAGD next year. And, I'm all about taking a lot of CE, getting a lot of skill, being very excellent. But at the end of the day, without great staff being the intermediary, between the patient and you just cannot do as much. We have 3 outstanding dental assistants at my practice, and we have a 4th who, it's an interesting position, but she is a hygienist, but she does hygiene part of the day, and she also assists me part of the day, and she does injections and all that too. So she's a very important part of our practice, but so we have very high level staff here at the office, and I couldn't do the numbers I do without them. Okay. So the staff's role is the intermediary also in let's not use a bad word and say selling, but in case presentation, in case acceptance. Some people say some of those are bad words. I'm just saying, look, if you're telling a patient they need a treatment and they're a little bit uncertain and the staff member reassures them that you're an outstanding dentist and that things are going to turn out great and they accept the treatment after that, more so than they would have before, hey, the staff played a big part. So that's very important. The staff is very common for a patient to walk up with the staff person after I've just done a big diagnosis and ask them, hey, what do you really think? And the assistant usually be like, oh, he's great. He's going to do a great job. And then they're like, oh, okay, sure. So yeah, that's what we're looking for. Okay. Now, once you get a great team, just know if you keep up with sports, look, dynasties don't last forever. It's very tough to have a football team, for example, that's great forever and ever and ever, because after a while, people, they start thinking they're great and there's dissension and all that. And if you don't figure out the motivations that your staff have for being at your practice, of course, people say money, some people say benefits. In my practice, I think it's really a big deal that we only work 3 days a week. So they have most of the week off to do stuff for their families and stuff like that. But whatever it is for your staff, find that motivation and try to keep them happy. In dentistry, you're like the owner of the team, but you're also like the general manager. And sometimes you're the coach. It's like the triple threat. It's tough. That's why being a dentist is really tough, guys. So yeah, you have to do all those roles. But if you can figure out what's best for your team, what makes them happy, you're going to be off to the races. Now, let's talk about buy-in. So, for example, we are making a huge change in our practice. We've been inching along toward a digital practice for a long time. We're big into the lasers and the 3D printing and the in-office milling and all that stuff, But we've lagged and we've been a little unhappy with our long-time dental software, and we still had some paper. Back in the big program, the practice productivity program, we taught the orange card, and that we still have them. We had them in our practice, right? Until just now, we've decided to go completely digital. We've gone to the cloud. That's a big deal. And so I actually had to come in, do some meetings with the staff and really help them, sit in with them as they talk to the software people to get their training, sat there and helped them understand some things. And I just had to be present and let them know how big of a deal this was and how I was there to support them every step along the way. And, that's just what you have. You have to figure out what's best for your team to get buy-in on a big major decision if you're making change. And hey, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a chance you would like to make some changes and get some improvements, right? So when you're making change, just remember you really need to get that staff buy-in. And sometimes if you can get like the buy-in from the head staff person or the person that everyone looks to, then you're home free. Then they can do all that stuff. But until then, you need to do it. So the doctor, you have to be up on everything. The staff can smell it a mile away if you're just saying, here, do this. And we learned that teaching 3D printing, right? A lot of doctors just send their staff. Well, the staff the ones without the doctor really didn't even pay attention. When the doctor comes and the doctor's bought in, the staff's a lot better. They would start implementing it as soon as they got back a lot of times. But if they just send the staff, they'll be okay at the course, but they're not really going to be bought in. Adaptability. The staff needs to know that you as the doctor are going to value their input and make changes as needed. Okay. Now you have to make sure they understand you're the doctor and it's your final decision, but you also have to be willing to listen to them and let them express their concerns. And hey, you might change your mind about some stuff. You don't know. So just keep an open mind as you're making those changes. Decisiveness, once the decision's been made, look, there's no going back. We're doing it this way and we'll fight through and I'll help you every step of the way. But once we make a final decision, that's it, guys. We're doing it this way. And that's just the way it's got to be. And if you're a good leader, you'll find a way to make that happen. Finally, integrity. That's so important to me. If I ever give my word, and if you know me, I'm pretty slow to give my word 100% on anything. But if I ever give my word, I'm going to try my dead level best to make good on that word. Because I've heard this, I'm sure in a movie somewhere, your word is your bond. My word is very important to me. I don't give it quickly, but once I give it, you can take it to the bank, buddy. So that's what your staff also needs to know, right? So once integrity is involved, then you can have these spirited discussions even between you and your staff. But in the end, they know you've got their back and you're going to do whatever best for them, best for the practice. And then also, don't be the doctor that tries to coach and motivate by fear and threatening, stuff like that. That's just not the way, especially these days. Back during 2020, the dynamic shifted between staff and doctors. Many doctors are lucky to have staff that are willing to work for them. And some doctors can't even afford staff because they got so overpriced in certain areas. So if you have good staff, treat them right. Just use common sense, be good to them, and don't be that guy who tries to use fear and intimidation to get things through the practice. Because once stuff may go through once, but down the road, it's going to come back and bite you. And nowadays, more likely than not, they're just going to leave if you're that kind of doctor. Okay, so that's it, guys. Today was kind of a really information-filled podcast, but it's so important to have great staff, superstar staff. And so I'm really looking forward. If you have any questions, hit me up. I'm going to put on the podcast page, I'm going to put an upload for like a mind map of this episode and like a summary and stuff like that. So, you can print those out and use them yourself. Print them out and see what works for your practice and what doesn't. That's what I always did when I was building my practice, right? So it never hurts to do any amount of studying or to get as many resources as possible. So I'll put that on the podcast page for you. Look forward to any questions. Please steer me in any direction you'd like. I'm here for you guys. I'm doing this for you guys, right? I love to teach. I do know that we have a very productive practice. I'm very proud of the excellence we produce every day in the practice. So, I'm not out here telling you, hey, I make the most money of anybody or my dentistry is the best. But I think that we are probably one of the more highly productive practices around that also keeps an eye on really extreme quality and excellence. So if you guys would like to learn from me on any of that stuff, just drop me a line, ask me a question, and I'm here to help you guys. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, and I'll see you guys next week.